All right, so welcome to day 2 of morphology. Last time I was trying to get you to believe that it's worth, for trying to think about what you have in your mind, the representations you have in your mind of what you can do with your native language. If we're trying to think about that it's useful to think, your mental list of elements, of your basic elements of your language, consists maybe of a list of morphemes, where morphemes are these units that can combine in various ways, as we've seen. Each morpheme we're going to need to tag with information about its sound, so how it's pronounced, its meaning, and then information like, is it a bound morpheme or a free morpheme? That is it the kind of morpheme that needs to combine with another morpheme or not? Right? So there are free morphemes like cat, right, where when we're listing its sound, we'll represent the fact that it's pronounced cat, and when we're listing its meaning, we'll represent the fact that it refers to a certain type of small mammal, and when we're listing whether it's bound or free, we'll say that it's free because cat is a word, you can say it by itself. As opposed to the S at the end of a word like cats, we'll say that's a bound morpheme because it's not a word on its own. Yeah? And if we're talking about bound morphemes, we sort of ran through bound morphemes from a bunch of different languages. We saw there are prefixes out there, there are suffixes, and there are other things. We talked about infixes, various other kinds of things. There are other kinds of morphemes to talk about. We eventually will. But first, so what I said here was first another kind of information we're going to have to list. But actually before that, is any of that unclear? Does that all make sense? Is everyone convinced of the existence of morphemes? Are you willing to at least assume that they exist? Okay. So you're used to looking words up in the dictionary, but in your mental dictionary, maybe what you have are not words, but morphemes, things that are at least sometimes smaller than words. Okay, so another kind of information we're going to have to list. Think about the bound morpheme ul that shows up at the end of industrial or national or autumnal. That's limited in where it can go. So there aren't words like assertal or impressal or industrializal. Yeah, again, let me pause and make sure that I'm not saying things that are just false. I think I told you there's a danger when you're a linguist, you gradually get out of touch with your native language. But I'm pretty sure this is true. Yeah. Is there a generalization about the kinds of things you can add ul to? What are they? Yeah, there's nouns. Yeah, so industry and nation and autumn are all nouns, as opposed to assert and impress and industrialize, which are not nouns. What are they? Verbs. Yep. Okay. And if anybody is listening to this and thinking, nouns, verbs, what the heck? Don't worry, we will talk more about this eventually. Yep. Okay. Okay, so we just said there is a word industrial because ul, maybe I should write this on the board, or I would if I thought there was chalk anywhere at all. Ah, here we go. I'll write it on the board right here. That will be helpful. No, I won't. I'll put it over here. We've just said ul attaches to nouns and can't attach to verbs. That's what's going on in the first little list there. So a noun can have ul on it. Write that again over there. This is surely not the most efficient way to use the blackboard. Is it necessary? Does it work? Can everybody see one or another of the things that I wrote? Is there anybody who can only see one of the things that I wrote? Yeah, okay. So it's worth it to write it twice. Okay, so ul attaches to nouns, yeah, and doesn't attach to verbs. That's why you can say industrial. That's why you can't say industrializal. Yeah. Why can you say industrializational? That's a word. It's kind of a long word. Industrializational, I guess, means having to do with industrialization. Yes? Because industrialization is a noun. Industrialization is a noun. So ation is attaching to industrialize, and it is apparently creating a noun. Yeah. So at least for some kinds of morphemes, we're going to want to list the kinds of things they attach to, sort of their input, and then their output. Yeah. So ation can attach to a verb like industrialize, and it can create a noun. Yeah. So ation attaches to a verb, and then what you get is a noun. Say that again. If you take a verb and add ation, what you end up with is a noun. And, you know, that sort of, if we have intuitions about which things are nouns and which things aren't, we have the intuition that industrialization is a noun. But now we can sort of check our intuition by asking ourselves, well, we know that ol attaches to nouns. Can we attach ol to industrialization? Yes. Yeah, so our intuition is right. That's a noun. Yeah. OK, cool. So there are at least some kinds of morphemes which sort of convert words into other types of words. Yeah. Convert nouns into verbs, or in the case of ol, verbs into adjectives. Sorry, nouns into adjectives. OK, so just adding some things to the list I showed you before. The lexicon has morphemes in it. The morphemes all contain information about sound and meaning and whether it's bound or free. And if it's bound, what kind of bound morpheme it is, a prefix or a suffix or a tone or an infix or whatever. And also, what kind of morpheme they can attach to. Do they attach to nouns or verbs or what? And at least for some kinds of morphemes, what the result is, whether you create a noun or a verb or an adjective or whatever. Yeah? Does that all sound OK? OK. Actually, sometimes we'll have to say more than that. So sincere, chaste, scarce, curious, deep, wide, and warm. What are those? They're adjectives. Yeah. And when you add ity to sincere, you get sincerity. Or when you add ity to chaste, you get chastity. And what are sincerity and chastity? They're nouns. Okay, so ity is attaching to an adjective and it's making a noun. Yeah. When you add th to deep, you get depth. Yeah, or when you add th to wide, you get width. So th is attaching to an adjective, and what is it creating? A noun. Yeah? So here we have two suffixes that both seem to do the same thing. They both attach to adjectives and create nouns. But we're going to have to say something else, right? Because you cannot say deepity, right? Or sincereth. Yeah? Those are not words. Yeah? So you can't add th to the adjectives at the top, and you can't add ity to the adjectives at the bottom. Yeah? So sometimes it's not enough to say this attaches to adjectives. You have to say it attaches to adjectives in this list. Yeah? Or we have to understand something more about the adjectives. Anybody have a guess about why there are two kinds of adjectives in English? Yes?
I was going to say that like some are Latin derived and then others are just from Old English and Germanic.
I think you were going to be right, but did you convince yourself not to say that?
Because scarce does not come from Latin. So.
Yeah, but it should have. Yeah. Yeah. So the ones at the top, yes, look sort of Latinate. You're absolutely right. And the ones at the bottom look sort of Germanic. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So there are a few things like this where it's a result of English history that we have suffixes that we got from ity is something that we got from French, and is something we got from Germanic. And so, yeah, these suffixes are sort of maintaining their history to a certain extent. Yeah?
Ity, I don't know if this is a real thing or just me thinking, but like it reminds me of Spanish, like edad.
It is related to that. Yes. Yep. Score. Yeah. Good point. Yep. OK. So, I mean, you can be a native speaker of English and not know this. It's not like we're all, remembering, oh, yeah, those are the Germanic adjectives. Those are the Latinate adjectives. I'll be sure to add ity to that one and th to that one. But, on some level, we have to say, yeah, there are adjectives of class 1 and adjectives of class 2 or something. There are purple adjectives and green adjectives, something. We have to distinguish these from each other. I'm giving you English examples, so this is a very common situation. Lots of languages have been in intense borrowing situations at some point in their history with weird results like this. OK. Now, we've talked about this a little bit. I said when you add the plural suffix to cats and dogs, this was one of the first things I said to you, it's pronounced differently on cats than it is on dogs. Yeah. And we talked about why, and we're going to talk more about why later. This is the kind of thing that happens sometimes when you add one morpheme to another morpheme. One or another or both of the morphemes changes a little bit. We'll talk a lot about this as we start talking about sound change, phonology, yeah, which is our next topic. But for now, we can just pause and notice, yeah, if you add ol to electric, you get electrical. But if you add ity to electric, you don't get electricity. You get electricity. Yeah. It's not because electricity would be hard to say. Yeah, it's just, you know, we have this idiosyncratic sound change, which we inherited again from French, that softens the K to an S there. Yeah. I'm sorry, say it again.
What is idiosyncratic?
Oh, idiosyncratic means, what does it mean? What do I mean when I say idiosyncratic? It means you sometimes have to say this particular morpheme has two different forms, depending on what it combines with. So you have to say more about that. So idiosyncratic means special, having something special to do with that. Right. So the suffix "ic" at the end of electric will change to "is" before "ity." Yeah. And there's more to say than that, but you have to say something that has that consequence. Yeah. Similarly, the past tense, it's like the plural suffix, which can be either z or s, like in cats and dogs, has a bunch of different forms. Sometimes it can be more of a d sound, like in hummed. Sometimes it can be more of a T sound, like in leapt. Yeah. And the verb itself can undergo changes when you add the suffix to it, right? So the past tense of hum is hummed. That's all fairly peaceful. But the past tense of leap is not leaped, it's leapt. Yeah. The past tense of go is not goed, it's went. Yeah, this is a case where it's what's called suppletion. So English speakers at some point in the history of English, for mysterious reasons of their own, decided that the past tense of go should borrow its past tense from another verb. So for the past tense of go, we use the past tense of another verb, wend, as in to wend your way. Yeah, and so the result of the past tense of go, it's no longer goed, it's now went. Languages do things like this. It'd be interesting to try to understand why. Or similarly, sing and sang, past tense of sing, there's no D or T or anything, you just change the vowel. So there are cases where a morpheme will have different forms depending on what it's combining with. That's the quick and dirty way of describing everything that's on the screen here. Yeah. Technical term for what's going on here, we say that when you have a morpheme that has two different forms, the two different forms, or multiple different forms, sometimes it's more than two, the different forms of a morpheme that it takes under different morphological circumstances, those things are called allomorphs. Yeah. So we say that, for example, the D and the T past tenses are two allomorphs of the past tense, or that leap and lep are the allomorphs of the verb leap, the verb that means jump. Yeah. Yes?
For example, when we bracket the when, what does that mean?
Oh, I'm just trying to call your attention to the fact that it's pronounced differently. Eventually, those brackets will mean something, but we haven't gotten far enough yet to get them to mean anything. Yeah. So right now, all I'm doing is calling. If I had said leap, leapt, I would have spelled leapt the same way I'm spelling leap. We would just pronounce it differently because English spelling is insane. And so I'm just putting the brackets there as a warning sign. Yeah, here's a place where the spelling is unreliable. Yeah. Good question. Eventually, we'll figure out how to talk about that. Yes?
So for the E and T, like those action elements,
Yeah.
is that signifying like the ED of the engine?
Yeah. So, right. So I called it D and T because hummed, the past tense of hum, although we spell it with an E before the D, if you say it, I think there's only one vowel in that word. It's hummed, right? We're not saying hummed. Yeah, that's not the past tense of hummed. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm trying to just spell it sound, which is hard because we haven't done phonology yet. Yeah, but that's a really good question. This is one of many places where English spelling will get you in trouble because English is spelled according to rules that are designed to repel invaders. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah? Any questions about any of this? These are really good questions you guys are asking. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Yes. So sometimes, so we will get a chance to talk more. In fact, we'll talk more very soon about how exactly to talk about allomorphy, this property of morphemes of having more than one form, of having allomorphs. All we've said so far is, well, sometimes morphemes have allomorphs. Yeah, so depending on what they combine with, they take different forms. There's often what's called a default allomorph. That is, there's a morpheme that is the basic one that shows up most of the time. And when we're making our special statements about other forms, well, they're going to be about the other forms. So there's going to be the form of the morpheme that you start off with, and then you will do things to it to create the other allomorphs. So, for example, the default assumption, if I'm telling you about a verb, I've made up a verb, it's fleep, to fleep. It's a special move in soccer in which you do a headstand and kick with your feet over your head. I just made that up. The past tense of fleep, you're going to assume that it's fleeped. Yeah. It could be flept. Yeah. It could be like leap. But you're going to assume that it's fleeped. That is, the default, you assume that morphemes don't have allomorphs other than the one, in this case, that shows up in sort of ordinary present tense circumstances when they're not combining. Okay? Yeah, is any of this surprising or weird? Yes?
Does that particular example have anything to do with the fact that it looks like the word leap?
I made it up that way to make you think that. So she asked, does that have anything to do with the fact that it looks like the verb leap? I guess the point I was making is we can't have a general rule that if you're making the past tense of a verb that ends in eep, that it's going to change to ep. Right? That can't, when we're trying to figure out what's going on with leap, that can't be what's going on. I guess I could have made that point in other ways. We have verbs like heap, like to heap up sand, and the past tense of heap is not hepped, right? It's heaped. But similarly, if I make up a new verb, you're not going to apply what happens in leap to the new verb. Yeah. Yes?
Are there any specific characteristics that would deter someone from going towards the default allomorph? Like if you made up another made-up word, would there be any characteristics about that word that would have us lean towards using the T at the ending?
Oh, I see. I don't think there's any way for me to induce you to do the leap-leapt thing, other than by telling you, oh, by the way, the past tense of fleep is flepped. But it's interesting to think about. Sorry, Raquel, you were about to comment on that.
I was thinking that maybe if the word, it within a specific discipline where the default one for that discipline is to do something that's viewed as irregular compared to the average thing. Like if you had AE to mean the plural, and we normally don't do that for all words, but you might do it for just I don't know, weird plants or something.
Yeah.
So, you might default to weird plant.
I see what you mean, and there are languages certainly in which it might be easier to make a point like that. I guess the other thing to say, the point you're raising sort of brings this up. People sometimes claim anyway that these kinds of irregular allomorphy, these things you just have to memorize about how things combine, that they'll go away they'll sometimes go away if you combine a morpheme with something else. So the classic example, for some reason, the plural of leaf, the things on trees, is leaves. And here, I'll put it over here too. But I've heard it claimed anyway that if you're talking about the athletic team, the Toronto Maple Leaf, so the singular would be the Toronto Maple Leaf, that the plural is the Toronto Maple Leafs, and not the Toronto Maple Leaves. I'm going to pause. I'm not enough of a sports fan to know whether this is true. I'm getting a thumbs up. Anybody here from Toronto, or is anybody a Maple Leafs fan? Anyone know whether this is true? Presumably, this is the kind of thing you could find out by looking at their website. What does it say on their T-shirts? But this is a claim that I've heard anyway. So there are some cases where this weird allomorphy goes away because you've made it part of this compound, or you've made it part of a name, right? So it's because it isn't just about, if we're talking about actual maple leaves, like leaves on a tree, then those are definitely maple leaves. And it's something about them being the name of an athletic team. Somebody else had a hand that I ruthlessly ignored. Oh, Joseph.
Yeah,
Oh, they do. You checked. Yes. This is the kind of thing. I can tell sometimes that I was born in a different century. There are all kinds of things where I raise interesting questions, and then in class someone will be like, yes, and here is the answer. It's like, oh, right, yeah. We have the ability to do that now. Anything else?
What do you think the past tense of slingshot is?
Ooh,
Because slingshotted and slingshot both feel wrong.
okay. Sling shoots. So question was, what's the past tense of slingshot? Two possibilities, slingshotted and slingshot. And there was another possibility which we will ignore for reasons of time. Who thinks the past tense of slingshot is slingshotted? Who thinks it's slingshot? Interesting. There are some examples. Does anybody have another alternative? Slingshot. No. Shame, for shame. Slung, shoot. No. Also no. There are some examples of verbs or morphemes that if you combine them, sorry, if you combine them with other morphemes that no one knows, this is kind of like slingshot. So take the verb to stride. So the past tense is strode. And then the participle was, he has stridden, strode, strod. Who thinks it's stridden? Who thinks it's strode? Who has something else they'd like it to be? Strud. Any votes for strud? No, you're all alone. I'm sorry. So this is a classic example of a verb where English speakers just are not sure what the participle of this is. Sorry? Smite is another good example. Yes. That one, yeah. So for me, so smitten has this other use, right? You can be smitten with someone, which I think is interfering. Yeah. Okay. So lots of fun things to think about allomorphy. Okay. So I'm going through all this partly. So I want to go back to the stuff about morphemes combining with things and creating other things. Because so far we have talked about various sort of cases where morphemes combine with other morphemes. And we've also talked about cases where morphemes combine with more than one morpheme. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit carefully, because it's going to be something, it's going to be useful as we go forward in the class. So let's talk about these particular morphemes. Think about the suffix ment. What does ment attach to and what does it create? So you can say things like government and treatment. You cannot say things like bodiment or powerment. What does ment attach to? What are govern and treat? Verbs. Okay, so ment, erase some stuff here. Talk about ment. It attaches to a verb, and it creates what? A noun, yeah? Treatment and government are both nouns. And I'll put that again over here. Ment attaches to verbs and creates nouns. Okay, cool. Now, how about the prefix m, as in m body and m power? What does m attach to, and what does it create? Attaches to nouns and makes them into verbs. Aha. I'll just say that again. Over here. Got to be a better way to do this. Attaches to nouns and makes them into verbs. Okay, cool. All right. So we just said we know why you can't say bodiment or powerment. It's because ment attaches to verbs, and body and power are not verbs. How come you can say embodiment and empowerment? All of you are saying the right thing, sort of in chorus. As the semester goes along, eventually you'll start saying these things in unison. This will be really cool, maybe with harmony. So yeah, you can't attach ment to body because body is a noun, but you can attach ment to embody. Yeah? So embody is a verb. Empower is a verb. M attaches to the noun body or the noun power and makes it into a verb. And then ment attaches to the resulting verb and makes it into a noun again. Yeah? So it's useful to think of these morphemes, so words like embodiment and empowerment, not just as consisting of three morphemes, although they do, right? A prefix and then a stem and then a suffix, but as consisting in three morphemes that are assembled in a particular order. Yeah? You first attach the prefix, and then you attach the suffix. People see why I'm saying it that way? Does that make sense? Okay, so here's a way of representing that fact, which is going to come in handy as we go forward. We're going to want to say, yeah, you start with power, and you glom power together with this prefix. I've given it the label af, which is just supposed to stand for affix. Yeah? So the affix m, the prefix m, attaches to the noun power and creates a verb. That's what the sort of lower left-hand side of that tree is meant to show you. Does that make sense? And then that verb is combined with this other affix, ment, and the result is a noun. M power ment. Does that make sense? So this tree is just a way of representing what I just said, which is it's useful to think of this as not just a word consisting of three morphemes, but a word consisting of three morphemes which are attached in pairs. That is, you attach m to power, and then you attach ment to empower. Yeah? Yeah.
Are the placements of the affixes on this tree because of whether they're prefixes or suffixes?
Yes. Yeah. So you're asking, why did I put m before power? And why did I put ment after empower? And yes, it's just whether they're prefixes or suffixes. That's all I was trying to do. Okay? So the tree is just a way of representing that kind of derivational history of this word. Right? So what's the order of operations that you use to create this word? Yeah?
So the order, like, so it goes from like the bottom up?
Yes, that's a way to talk about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah? Okay. Yes?
I'm curious what we do with.
Oh, well, infixes would be where I would fail at what I'm trying to do. This was your point from just now. You know, I'm trying to represent whether things are prefixes or suffixes by using the tree. If we were doing Tagalog, and you know, I wanted to do the past tense of the verb baba, which involves an infix I'd probably, you know, put together, you know, here's the affix, and this was a verb, and I'm going to put these two things together as a single thing. Yeah. And then, yes, somewhere else, I would have to say, oh, by the way, this is an infix. Yeah. So try not to take too seriously which things are to the left and right of which other things. What I'm really trying to get across with these trees is the order in which you are putting things together. Yeah. The fact that some things are prefixes and others are suffixes and others are infixes or tones or whatever all else, that's somebody else's job for today. Okay? Right. Okay. There's a standard way of talking about trees like this. Trees like this are very popular. We will try to get comfortable with them. We will spend lots of time looking at trees as the semester goes along. There's a standard way of talking about them which involves feminine kinship terms. So we'll say that the sister of M is a noun because those two things are next to each other on the tree. There are two daughters of the same thing, that verb node that's above them both. Or another way to say it is that that verb is the mother of both M and power. Yeah. I think that's as far as people go with the feminine kinship terms. People don't talk about like aunts, you know, or whatever. So it's sisters and daughters and mothers. Yeah. Nobody even talks about grandmothers. It's nuclear families. Yeah? Okay, so this is just terminology for talking about this. So ment has a verb as its sister, and its mother is an N. When we say ment has a verb as its sister and a noun as its mother, that's a way of saying things like what I have on the board here twice, that ment is something that takes a verb and converts it into a noun. Right? That's how that kind of fact is represented in these trees. Okay? Okay. Now, there will be times, you know, big surprise, this is like day 3, I've been looking at comparatively simple cases. There are going to be examples where we'll want to distinguish multiple affixes that are maybe similar to each other. So think about the prefix un. The prefix un shows up in words like unwrap and untie, and also in words like unlikely and unhappy. Yeah. These two uns arguably mean different things, and they're attaching to different things. So somebody help me be less vague. What's the first un doing? What does it attach to? Verbs. Okay, so there's an un that attaches to verbs. What does the un that attaches to verbs mean?
An undoing of that.
Yeah, you undo, wait, I just used the, yeah, you reverse, there we go. You take the result state of the verb and you cause it to go back to the way it was before the verb was done, or something like that. Yeah, so if you unwrap something, you take something which is wrapped and you cause it to not be wrapped anymore, or something like that. Same with untie. So there's an un that attaches to verbs and means something like reverse. Or to put it another way, there's an un that attaches to verbs and means something like reverse. That's actually putting it the same way, but in a different place. Yeah? Okay, and then there's another un that attaches to what? What's the other un? What does it attach to? Adjectives. And what does it mean? Yeah, like not, or something like that. I guess get into debates about whether unhappy and sad mean the same thing, or unlikely and whatever the opposite of likely is. What am I putting here? Adjectives. Not. Okay. Okay. So two uns. Yes.
If you consider a word like unwrapping, is the wrapping a participle and un a third un, or is it unwrapped and then ing modifying the unwrapped?
Really good question. What kind of tree should we draw? Should we draw a tree? So the question was, for unwrapping, are we going to attach un to wrap, giving a verb, unwrap, and add ing to that? Or are we going to add ing to wrap, giving you wrapping, and then add un to that, a third un? What do people think? What should we do?
Depends on what you're using the word as.
Yeah? Do you have?
If you're using the word as the verb, I am unwrapping this thing, then you would do the first, where you attach the ing to wrap and you undo the wrapping.
Yeah, so well, we have an un, maybe this is a way to think about it. We have an un that we can attach to verbs. And so in the case of unwrapping, I guess we could hope that we can survive with just that un until something forces us to do something else. But you have an idea too.
Maybe if you try to mean it as a verb, like unwrapping,
Yeah.
then the unwrap should be the main part and the ing should be added to it.
Yeah.
Because it's just something that indicates the form of the word.
Yes.
You want to use like unwrapping as the noun,
Mm-hmm.
and probably should be like wrapping as
Right, so I guess there are two words unwrapping. This was your point too. There are two words unwrapping that we should think about. One is he is unwrapping the presents, and the other is unwrapping presents is fun. Yeah, where unwrapping presents is fun, hopefully unwrapping is some kind of noun. That's what people sometimes call a gerund. Yeah, where you convert a verb into a noun that means the process of doing the verb or something like that. But maybe in both cases we would hope, yeah, that you would first create the unverb, right? And then you would add ing to it, because ing attaches to verbs and does other things with them. Sometimes they're still verbs, sometimes they're nouns. That would be my first hope, until somebody made me hope for something else. Maybe one way to say this is, these are cases where we know that there have to be two uns. Yeah? Both because these two uns seem to mean slightly different things, and because, well, they are attaching to things of different kinds, verbs and adjectives. Your example where we're adding un to, so suppose we were thinking about the unwrapping is fun case, the gerund case. If you wanted to add un after you added ing, after you made it into a noun, you'd be invoking an un that attaches to nouns. And then the next question people would ask you would be, okay, so can you show me an example of un attaching to a noun where the noun isn't created from a verb with ing, just a plain noun? That would be the strongest kind of evidence that we needed a third un. Does that make any sense? Yeah. Good question. Other questions? Okay. All right. So we need What does it attach to? What does it create? Okay, cool. So we need two uns. Here's another affix. So think about ubble, drinkable, breakable, watchable. What does ubble attach to? Verbs. And what do you get? Adjectives. Yeah, so ubble. Ubble converts verbs into adjectives. And it also converts verbs into adjectives. Un doesn't convert the things it attaches to at all so far, yeah? So un, we'll go back to un. Sure we will, there we go. Un attaches to verbs, and what you get is a verb. Un attaches to adjectives, and what you get is an adjective. So it changes the meaning, but it doesn't change the category of the word. The thing is still the same. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we have two uns, one that attaches to verbs and makes new verbs. Yes, thank you, I just said that. And then another un that attaches to adjectives and makes new adjectives. Yeah. And then we have an ubble that attaches to verbs and makes adjectives. Yeah? Okay? So now let's think about a case where we're adding un and also ubble, a word like unlockable. What should that be able to mean? Yes, is the answer. So if we're going to start with lock, let me find an eraser. So we'll do this over here first. If we're going to start with lock, what shall we add first? Un, let's say. Okay, so lock is a verb. We'll add un. We'll get, so here's an affix. Put these two things together. What will the result of adding un to lock be? Another verb. Yep. And then we'll take ubble, which we know attaches to verbs and creates adjectives. Yeah? So we'll take that affix, we'll attach it to that verb, and what we'll get will be an adjective, right? So we'll have an adjective which we created by first putting on lock and then putting ubble on unlock. Yeah? I'm going to draw the other option over here. Where am I going to put it? Here. So over there, we attached un first. So this time we're going to take the verb lock and we're going to add ubble to it. What's the result going to be when we add the affix ubble to the verb lock? An adjective. And we're going to add the affix un to that adjective, and the result of that will be an adjective. Both of these will be pronounced unlockable. But what will they mean? What will that one mean? It cannot be locked. Yeah? So this is a broken lock. Yeah? It is unlockable. Yeah? Right? Because when you add ubble to lock, you get an adjective. Possible to lock this thing. And then when you add un to it, you say not possible to lock this thing. How about that one over that unlockable over there? The one where we first added un to lock and then we added ubble. What does this one mean? Can be unlocked. Yeah? This is not a broken lock. It's a lock that's working properly. Yeah? And that's our intuition about the word unlockable. It is ambiguous. If you say, this door is unlockable because I have the key, or this door is unlockable, somebody calls a locksmith. Does that sound right? It can mean either of those things. Yes?
Okay, I might be getting at that. I do think there's a particular order to on and upload of this. Like, if we looked at unsinkable.
Yeah?
I don't tend to hear unsinkable as being able to like something.
Right. Do you think there is a verb unsync?
I guess not.
Yeah. So actually you're raising, oh yes.
Does it have to do with like the transitivity of the verbs?
Well, you can sink a ship, right? So the verb's transitive. And the ship can also sink, so it can be intransitive. You can lock a door, and a door can lock. So we have a bunch of verbs that can go back and forth between being transitive and intransitive. We'll talk more about transitivity later, but for people who are wondering what the heck we're talking about, verbs are said to be transitive if they have both a subject and an object. So if you sink a ship, I sank the ship, then the verb is transitive. If you say the ship sank, then there's only a subject, there's no object, so the verb is intransitive. English has a lot of verbs that can be either, and a lot of the verbs that are up here can be either. Your question raises a really good point, though, which is, I just sort of casually said, you can add un to verbs, and it means undo the effect of the verb. Yeah? Look, unwrap, untie. Yeah. But you can't unsink a ship. Even if you go down with divers and find the ship and bring it back to the surface, and, you're still not unsinking the ship, I don't think, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at this. Yeah. So we have to say some other things about that un. You're raising a good point. There are some verbs that cannot be reversed, yeah. And sink maybe is one of them. For something. Joseph, yeah.
This might just be me, but I feel like because the word is ambiguous, at least in the context that I've heard that word, I feel like in my mind, like my brain has decided that unlockable means something that generally means this one, like it cannot. Oh shoot, hold on. No.
That's the other one? Yeah. That's, if your brain is like my brain, then it likes that one. The one you can't see, it's not your fault. Yeah, it's over there under the slide. Yep.
The one that
Yep.
cannot be locked.
Yep.
Versus like, or something that can be unlocked. Right?
Yeah. It's unlockable. The door is unlockable. Mm-hmm.
Versus like, if it's unlockable.
Yep.
You just say the lock is broken.
Yeah. I might be more likely to say that. I think you're right. I have that feeling too. And actually, I sort of cheated a second ago when I said, unlockable, it's ambiguous, you can say either one. But for me at least, if I want to mean that one, the one that means it's broken, you can't lock it, I kind of have to say it's unlockable. As opposed to this one, which you say it's unlockable. I kind of have to put another stress on un or something like that. That's my feeling. But maybe some of you are looking at me as though I've grown two heads, which is a kind of look that I get a lot just kind of walking around, so I'm used to it. Does anybody else have that feeling? I don't think I pronounce these two verbs the same way, these two adjectives the same way. Yes?
Yeah, I think that I would definitely put like a stress in the word in different locations.
Yeah.
Like for in one case, if you want to say that it's not lockable, I would put the stress on the un.
Yep.
If I want to say the other one, I would put the stress on the word lock.
Yes. Now, this is 24900. We will surely not get to the bottom of this. But this is a really interesting sort of question. And maybe one of the things we're learning is that if we want to have a full understanding of how stress works, we need to be willing to think about these structures. These structures are apparently informing our intuitions about where stress goes and how it's treated, which is kind of interesting. You had a hand up a while ago, and I never got to you. I'm sorry.
I was mention that I feel like in a sentence, you can't unsink a ship.
Yeah.
Unsink does sound correct.
Oh.
That's just maybe like
You can't unsink a ship. Oh, boy. In general, you can't unsink a ship. But I think this ship might be unsinkable. Maybe. I don't know. You can't unburn a letter. You can't unbreak a teapot. Yeah. So maybe I was too fast to say there are verbs that can't be reversed. And to the extent that you can reverse them, I think you then get both of these adjectives. So.
like a certain effect.
Yeah. Ooh, these are deep waters. Fortunately for me, other people are raising their hands. Let me see what they have to say. Yes.
I think it's like you're pointing out in the sentence that that's not a thing.
That's true.
You're pointing out in the sentence like almost like that sounds ridiculous. You can't unsink a ship. That's not even a word.
Yeah. We have this crazy scientist at MIT. He's doing this weird diving research. He's spending all his time trying to unsink ships. I don't know. Maybe it's just a matter of the number of times you say it, so that it eventually, It's just that, you know, unlocking a door, this is the kind of thing that happens all the time, whereas, or unwrapping a present, whereas unsinking a ship, you know, people generally don't. So yeah, maybe that's all that's happening. Did you have a question?
Well, I was essentially going to say that it might have to do with whether or not the reversion is temporary. Like, if reversing the verb is a permanent thing and you won't be able to restore it to its previous state.
Yes.
Have the same properties.
Ah. So if you unlock a door, you can lock it again. Of course, if you can unsink ships, you can probably sink them again, right? This is going to get expensive and wet, but yeah. So it's presumably something you can do. Raquel?
I have two thoughts, and the first thought is that unlock is an actual word, but I don't think unsync is an actual word. So maybe we think of unlock as its own, like, specific word that we can add able to. And then the second thought is that unbearable breaks this because we don't think unbear.
Oh, that's well, yeah. So, but okay, those are both really interesting thoughts. I mean, the first thought is sort of what we're arguing about, is whether unsync is a word or not. And I guess the answer that's sort of emerging is sort of. You know, it's just not something you do all the time, and so our intuitions about it are kind of fuzzy. Unbearable is a really nice example. Basically, what that's telling us is that what the heck is it telling us? So that bearable, right, the adjective bearable, right, has a couple of meanings. The meaning that you have in mind, let me remind my computer not to do that, sorry. The meaning that you have in mind is one where bearable, it doesn't just mean can be carried, right? It means something more emotional than that, right? And no, but it can have that kind of emotional meaning when you're you know, oh, yeah, what? She bore the loss of her stock holdings well. Yeah. So yeah, no. So maybe okay. So I guess what we're learning is that although you cannot unbear something, maybe because there's no sense in which you can reverse the bearing of something. There is an adjective, bearable, and you can add the other un to that, the un that attaches to bearable, to adjectives. It means not bearable. There, yes, okay, good. That's what I got distracted by emotions, as so often. But yeah, that just has to do with the fact that you know, we're now debating about whether you can unsink a ship, but you surely can't unbear a loss. I don't even know what that would mean. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, lots of questions. Yes?
Yes, I think it's about the number of times. Like, we used to say follow, and now we can say unfollow. And we have that
yeah. Follow and unfollow is a really good example, actually. Yeah, so it used to not be possible to unfollow things. You know, one crucial difference, I guess, is that if you wrap something or tie something, you change it, right, so that it's different now as a result of what you've done. So if you tie something, it used to be just a string, and now it's a knot, you know. Or if you wrap something, it used to be a thing, and now it's a present, you know. If you sink a ship, you know, this is what we've all been talking about, you know, it goes from being on top of the water to being underneath it. As opposed to follow, if you follow someone in real life, you don't do anything to them, right? They're still the same as they were. We kind of have this intuition. The follow that you can unfollow someone is something that changes them from a person who has, you know, n number of followers to a person who has n+1 number of followers. So there's something about whether the verb changes the state of the object. I think that's got something to do with all this, which is why these examples about unsinking ships and unbreaking pots are kind of interesting to think about. Yeah. Yes?
Turns out I just searched it up on the sync on the Scrabble dictionary. It's not.
Well, Scrabble thinks it's not a word. so I mean, Scrabble, you know, they have to have rules. They have to draw a line somewhere. Yeah. Yes?
I found it hard. They make STA.
It was just Scrabble. We should have a Scrabble version of 24900 where we try to figure out what's going on in Scrabble. But Scrabble is not English, right? It's something related to English, but not the same. Yeah. We're allowed to have our own intuitions about what things are words and what things aren't. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but it's like we started off lecture by saying that meaning can come from morphology.
Yes.
And now we're trying to, I guess, figure out morphology based on meaning, right?
Well, so one way to think about it, right, would be to think, so this stuff about which verbs can you attach un to, where I just said, well, so we started by saying un can attach to verbs, and it gives you a new verb that means take the thing that is in the state resulting from the action of the verb and put it back in the state that it was in before you did the verb. That's one way of defining what un means. Yeah. And then did that make sense? Yeah. So if you untie something, what does that do? It takes something which is tied, which is in the state that you're in as a result of the verb to tie, and converts it into something which is not tied anymore. Yeah, that's what it is to untie something. Yeah. So if that's what un means, then yes, you should be able to attach it to verbs, but you should only be able to attach it to verbs that change the state of their objects, because it makes reference to this sort of change of the state of the object. Yeah. This is me making stuff up, right? Here in front of all of you, but this seems reasonable to me. I think it might be something like that. Yes.
Wouldn't that make unsync valid?
It should.
Oh, no.
Well, so it should be valid. Yes.
Something doesn't it change
It certainly does change the state, yes. Gosh, is that the time? Yeah. So look, so for me at least, this is what is cool and fun about linguistics. Here it is, day 3, and we are right on the edge. I'm a professional linguist. This is what I do for a living, and I'm not quite sure what the answer to this question is. Yeah? So you guys could be the ones who figure out what the heck is going on with unsync, right? To which the answer could be, yeah, unsync is more or less okay, right? It's just not something people do all the time, and so we're not used to hearing it. Maybe that's the easy way of getting out of where I am. Or maybe there's more to say about what exactly un does to the meaning of the verb. But that's the kind of answer to your question that we would get. That if we define everything about the meaning of un, that will help us understand why it can attach to some verbs but not others. Yeah. And as you can see, we're not quite there, maybe. Joseph?
Put it another, if you have the verb help, you help somebody.
Yes?
Yeah.
Well, you can be unhelpful. Oh, God. But there you're adding it to an adjective. Yeah. So you cannot unhelp someone. So, I mean, this is a good example of something somebody should have said to me when I first said, well, some verbs change the state of the object and others don't, right? So if I burn something, it goes from being a thing to being a pile of carbon. And if I break something, it goes from being the thing to being, if I sink a ship, it goes from being on top of the water to being under the water. If I help someone, maybe they're the same as they were before, just in a better position. This is a place where you're entitled to ask, what do you mean by changing the state? What counts as the state? And we really must go on. Yes? I guess, yeah, maybe that's...
Helping someone, you can't exactly revert your help. Like, you can hurt someone following that, but you can't exactly undo the help they've already done.
I don't know. I mean, look, suppose I write you a recommendation letter for a job, right? That's helpful to you. I helped him. And then suppose I write another letter saying, you know what, I take it all back. In fact, it's the opposite of everything I just said. Hold on, guys. Yeah. No, I see what you mean. All right, so moving on then from this slide, which has generated so much cool discussion. This is great. Okay, so trees. Yeah, there. Why is unlockable ambiguous? Because it has 2 trees. Or to put it another way, there are these 2 morphemes you're adding to lock, and you can add them in either order, with the result that the word is ambiguous in the way that we expect. So here's a model for how we're going to make words. We're going to take morphemes, pairs of morphemes, and we're going to glom them together. And we feel silly saying the word glom over and over again, so we've made up another word for that. We call it merge. So merge is this process that allows you to take 2 things and put them together and make a new thing. So you take un and lock, and you merge them together to make unlock. Merge is recursive, which means only that it can reapply to its own output. So You take un and lock and merge them to make unlock. And now you have a new thing, unlock, and that can also undergo merge. So you can take unlock and merge it with able to get you unlockable. That's what's going on in the tree on the left. That's all linguists mean when we say that merge is recursive. You may sometimes hear people have arguments about what it means. That's what it means. So it means once you've merged two things to create a new thing, you can take that new thing and apply merge to it as well, and make new things that way. Yeah, that's all it means. Okay. And then there are statements, which we have to put somewhere, like able needs to merge with a verb, and the result is an adjective. Yeah, things like that. Okay? Yes?
Does the tree have to be binary?
So I said we're going to take two things and we're going to merge them and make a new thing. Really good question about which people have arguments. Yeah? Actually seems to be the case that the trees are binary, which is interesting. So to put it another way, there are lots of places where you can't tell whether the tree is binary or ternary or whatever. But in every place where you can tell, nobody has come up with a convincing example of a tree that is anything other than binary, which is itself kind of interesting. I'll try to understand why that is. We're going to be doing lots of merging in morphology, and then not so much in phonology. And then when we get to syntax, there will be much merging, many mergings of things, words, putting them together to make phrases of various kinds. Okay? So try to get comfortable with the concept of merge. Should be easy. It's not a hard concept. Okay. This is great. I just want to talk a little more systematically about allomorphs. So mentioned before, you take morphemes, you merge them together, you create new things, and what often happens is that one or another or both of the morphemes will change its form, right? So the past tense of leap is leapt. The verb changes from leap to lep. Yeah? The past tense suffix can either be t or d or some other things. Yeah? So I want to talk a little bit systematically about these allomorphs. I'll start by saying that there are cases where there just isn't anything interesting, no, there isn't anything helpful to say. Past tense of go is went, right? And it just is. You know, if you want to learn English, you've got to learn that. There's nothing else to say. But there are other places where there are sort of general laws about which allomorph you're going to get under which circumstance. We sort of alluded to that a little bit when we were talking about cats and dogs, right? That S and Z, those allomorphs of the plural, are sort of conditioned by the sound that's before them, and we'll talk more about that. So I'm going to give you an example where there's more to say about the allomorphs. This is an example from Polish. I should say I've spelled Polish here in a strange way. If anybody here speaks Polish, this isn't the way you're used to seeing Polish spelled. So I've spelled it in a way that makes it easier for people who don't speak Polish to see what the words, how the words are pronounced, more or less. So here are some Polish words. They mean language, pot, juice, and bow, and you've got some plurals there. Yeah. Does anybody here speak Polish? Excellent. I can just make anything up that I want. Yeah. Believe me, this is how Polish works. It is, really. I'm not making things up. Does anybody find any morphemes in here? I mean, there's morphemes that mean language, pot, juice, and bow. What's the plural morpheme? E, yeah? So this suffix is spelled with the letter I. It's pronounced E. Okay? No allomorphy here so far. Here are some more words. Bank of a river, debt, and lie, which have plurals. The idea of a plural of lie is a little strange if you ask me, but nobody asked me. If you add the plural morpheme there is E, and you get those plurals. Anybody seeing any allomorphs? So the plural suffix is still the same, but debt, for example, has two allomorphs. What are they? Somebody attempt to pronounce them. It's okay, none of us speak Polish. Yeah. Yeah, we've got dług and dług. Yeah? So debt has one allomorph that ends in a K and another allomorph that ends in a G. What's the rule, do you think, that determines when you get K and when you get G? Yeah.
Would it have to do with the consonant that comes immediately before the vowel? Like, where it wants to like sound sort of like going from like z to ga, as opposed to like sa to ka.
Oh, I see. That's a neat idea. So maybe we could work out a way. So all of you are realizing the problem. The problem is there are the words we started with where we have all these words that end in K, and when you make the plural, there's still a K before the E. And then we have these other words where the word ends in K, and then when you add the plural, you get a G. Yeah?
I feel like we need more information because even if you look at the word for bow and lie,
Yeah.
they're the same word in the singular form.
Very nice point. So this slide was carefully constructed to have what's called a minimal pair. Yeah? Bow and lie are both pronounced wook in the singular. But in the plural of bow is wookie, and the plural of lie is woogie. Yeah? This is meant to make us despair about the option that you were raising, right? Which was maybe if we look at everything about the word, we'll be able to predict which K's become G's and which K's stay K's. No. Give up. Despair. Yeah? Cannot be done. We cannot, if we start with a K, we cannot predict which K's will become G's and which ones will not. Yeah? I think that's a neat idea. So can you say more about that?
I mean, my first guess might just be that if you end in a GI, you're simply supposed to pass into a K.
Yeah, so I'll just say again what you just said, just to make sure everybody heard it. I framed the problem as which K's change into G's and which K's don't change into G's. And then we convinced ourselves, thanks to your point, that problem is impossible. We will just have to list, well, sometimes K becomes G, sometimes K doesn't become G. But that's because I phrased the problem as which K becomes G and which one doesn't. If we look at this problem in the other direction, this is your suggestion, if we start with the plural and think about the singular, then we can say to ourselves, okay, there are some nouns that end in K and some nouns that end in G. And in the singular, what's the rule in the singular? Do you get K or do you get G? K, always. Yeah? So what we need for Polish is the willingness to say, yeah, there are nouns that end in K and nouns that end in G. The plural suffix is this letter I, this E. Yeah? And there's a very general rule. If you have a G at the end of a word, turn it into a K. Yeah? So if we're making the lexicon for Polish, what we want is for the word for bow to be in the lexicon wook, and for the word for lie to be in the lexicon wug. Yeah? And then the plural suffix is E, and there's a general rule, G at the end of a word becomes K. Right? This means the lexicon is a little bit abstract, right? If you ask a Polish speaker, what's the word for lie? They're going to say wuk. And if you say, no, it's not, it's wug, they're going to be like, who's the Polish speaker around here? Is it you or me? Yeah? But in fact, you are right and the Polish speaker is wrong. Yeah? The word for lie is wug. Yeah? And then there's this rule. Yeah? G becomes K at the ends of words. What that means is that the morpheme for lie, if we want to know what's the morpheme for lie, well, it isn't what the speaker would say it is necessarily. It doesn't have to be a morpheme that you ever hear by itself. It only shows up in the plural, not in the singular. That's the most economical way of talking about Polish, because the fact is, I can tell you this from my vast knowledge of Polish, you will never, no matter how many Polish words you look at, find one that ends with a G. They never do. Plenty that end in K, but they never end with a G. So this rule is one that we can rely on. Yes?
Does that make wog a noun morpheme?
Oh. Well, this morpheme is a free morpheme because it doesn't need to combine with anything. It has an allomorph, wuk, which is the result of this general sound change, that G becomes K at the ends of words. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. That's a good point. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So this is a place, I told you, go has the past tense went, and give up on coming with up with sound changes that will get you that. That's just, our ancestors being quite peculiar. Yeah, but Polish has this general rule that changes final G to K. And so for Polish, we don't, in the end, need to list allomorphs. Lie has allomorphs wuk and wug. We can if we want. We need a hobby. It'll keep us off the streets. But it's OK to just say, no, there's the word for lie is wug, and then there's this general sound change law that changes the G to a K. Yes?
Is this transliteration or is it actual Polish?
So this is not Polish orthography. Yeah, so this is not ordinary Polish spelling. I think I started by saying that. Yeah?
I was just a little, because I don't know Polish, but I know Ukrainian and Russian.
Yeah.
So I understand half of it.
Yes.
And like, I was just checking the actual Polish words. And
Yes.
if you check the actual word for book,
Yeah.
O,
Yeah.
it actually has G in it.
Yes. Yes.
If you check the one for lie, no.
No, that's lie. Yeah.
It has K in it.
Yes.
And if you check the one for lie, it has K in it.
Yeah.
It makes too much sense.
Yes. So I think I started this by saying I'm going to spell these Polish words in an unusual way. And I tried to make it sound like that was for your benefit, so that you would know how the words were pronounced. But I was actually obscuring the fact which you were bringing up, which is that Poles spell as though this rule had not happened. Yeah? So they pronounce the word for lie and the word for bow the same way. But you're right, they spell the word for lie ending with a G. They also don't use the letter W. This is their barred L. Yeah. Yeah. Yes?
So has language acquisition been studied in Polish? Because it would almost seem like speakers of Polish gain the plural form of the word before they gain the singular.
Oh, I see what you mean. There's a lot of work on the acquisition of morphological and phonological rules like this. I don't know, I can't swear that people have worked on this in Polish. My understanding is that children, this is a very common kind of sound change, and we'll talk more about it as the class goes along. And my understanding is that children who are learning languages that have this kind of sound change, it's called final devoicing, acquire it kind of immediately. It's not something that takes them a while. Yeah. Other questions? Children are very smart. This is one of the big results of language acquisition research. They know things before you would think they do. OK, let's see where we are. Yeah, that's where we are. Yep, so we'll never be able to predict which K's change to G in the plural. So what we'll do is posit these underlying forms over there on the right, some ending in K, others ending in G. And then we'll have a rule. G becomes K at the end of a word. And given the time, I think this is a good place to stop. Are there any questions? Yes?
It's like ending letters, is there any like reason behind it other than like pronunciation clarity or like?
You know what? Let's talk about that when we do phonology a little more carefully. Because yes, this change from G to K, you're right, it's part of a more general change. There are lots of things like this that happen, and it's a very common change. So we'll try to talk more about it as we get closer to that. Good question. OK? So again, problem set due today, interpreted generously. It's due by dawn. And I'll try to put up a new problem set before today is over.